All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to, what is it, our 7th episode here at the Insider Guides industry webinars. 2 months now, we've been in lockdown and our world and many of our workplaces have changed. We're working from home, and we've been exploring a whole range of topics about the international education sector. We've talked to a bunch of really interesting speakers, and we're going to keep doing it. We've received some really good feedback, and we're really grateful that everyone keeps tuning in every week or every second week to hear us break down the topics and unpack them. My name is James Martin. I run Insider Guides. We make products to help the international student experience. We help brands talk to students pre-departure, pre-decision, onshore, and right through to getting a job. We've been doing this for around 10 years now, and we're in here in Adelaide. I'm at my home down by the beach, and we're going back to the office next month. So it's a nice. Where I think the team is ready to go back. So I'll just thought I'd delve into. I want to introduce Rob Lawrence here. He is he as you know, he was on a webinar a few weeks ago, and he's actually reached out and offered to co-host these industry webinars with us at Insider Guides, and I snapped it up at the opportunity. I was super happy that Rob wanted to do that, because his insights are unbelievable, and I'm just grateful that he wants to share this journey with us. So Rob, thank you so much for coming on as a co-host with us. And over the next few weeks, Rob and I are going to interview a range of guests and unpack a range of topics from, we're going to talk about recruitment, we're going to talk about marketing, we're going to talk about transnational education and how do you market when you can't travel. We're going to talk about study tours and all sorts of different parts of the sector. We're really fascinated about that. But today we are extremely excited to have Karyn Kent here as the Chief Executive of StudyAdelaide. And we're going to explore whether cities can meet the needs of students post-COVID. And can they really adapt to the changing expectations of students? And what are the variables? What are the red flags and the opportunities of those in leadership within the cities, and how they're going to manage it? This is an interactive webinar. Feel free to ask a question. We will get to it, hopefully. And we have some questions that were sent in already. And there's a poll as well. I'll launch that in a second. We've got some really interesting questions we would love to hear your feedback on. And this will be recorded and will go up on our industry news YouTube channel as well. So I'll just introduce the two speakers here we have. So I want to introduce Rob again. Rob Lawrence is an experienced strategist in the areas of marketing, strategy, research, branding, and media. Rob finds solutions to all sorts of complex issues across all service categories, including corporates, governments, SMEs, peak bodies, universities, schools, tourism, and the professions. And he's seeking to support organizations with marketing clarity. He brings an unrivaled understanding of target segments and their drivers, as well as creative and effective strategies to reach them. I'm thrilled that we have Rob, not only as a guest, but now as a host. Thanks, Rob.
Pleasure.
Yeah. Welcome to the Insider Guides universe. Karyn Kent is the Chief Executive of StudyAdelaide, responsible for marketing Adelaide as an international student destination. She has an extensive career in destination marketing, including executive roles at the South Australian Tourism Commission and Tourism Australia. In 2016, Karyn was appointed to the National Council for International Education, which was formed to oversee the implementation of Australia's first national strategy for international education 2025, working with education providers, industry, and federal, state, and territory governments. Karyn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, James. Welcome. Hi, Rob.
Hey, Karyn.
We're going to start this webinar with the student experience. It has changed dramatically already. I'd like to work out how it's going to change moving forward. Let's start off with some of the feedback you're receiving. What feedback are you receiving about how cities have responded to the current dynamics, particularly around the student experience? In the future, if that happens again, what can we do differently?
Look, I think this is a very good question. I mean, the feedback we could look at a number of different sources where that feedback's coming from, but I think students are our primary concern. And I guess some of the forums I've been involved in, one of the things that obviously we've had to do is evolve our activities as everyone is doing into a digital environment. So we're doing, I'm doing some Q&As with students and things like that. The biggest takeout, I guess, I have is that students just want to know that someone cares. I think that's really, really important. That comes through in the comments that we have at the end of our sessions. They just want to know that that someone cares about them. It is important to back up your actions with words, though. Your words with actions. I got that the wrong way around. And also, I think we have to really focus on what's within our control. So, we can't overpromise because there's so many things outside of our control. Also, we be very conscious, I guess, of complementing what institutions are putting in place for the student experience, not replicating. It's hard to avoid some duplication, but we're really, I guess, trying to think about where we can make a difference as a city or a state destination. And your question around, what lessons, I guess, have we learnt, right, from the last couple of months, and what would we do differently? I think one takeout has been the varying levels of preparedness by our stakeholders, so there are a number of institution and city and state stakeholders who have touch points with international students. So I think, managing our expectations about how prepared they are for crisis situations. Students don't know where to go until they really, they don't necessarily know who to reach out to until they're in a situation, right? So that's been really interesting. This has all come around very fast, particularly some of this welfare situation. So I think that's something we would be better prepared for in the future. Is again not assuming that everyone can be as prepared or can quickly respond as quickly as what we would want to or what we're striving to.
Karyn, it's Rob here. I like your comment. It's all about giving them a sense of identity. But I've got a two-part question here. One's about impact and one's about engagement. What factors have you seen that have had the greatest impact upon the experience of students in the city, and what might happen in the future in terms of impact? But also, how does a city and a community largely respond to ensure that there is continual engagement with students to keep that sense of identity in place?
Look, I think, honestly, I think it depends on, every city is a little bit different in terms of, I guess, if I look at my counterparts around Australia, we've all got a slightly different emphasis on what our role is, okay? So, and I think there's been some fantastic initiatives around Australia that have really honed in on a particular need and therefore is designed to have the biggest impact. So, New South Wales have had a great, their legal centre, is a fantastic initiative as well. So for us, it's very much about the employability piece. And I know that everyone around Australia is very focused on that now. But we've had to be, we've recognised that the perception around Adelaide, one of the perceptions around Adelaide is that there are less jobs here. And we think that that's purely attributed to the fact that, mainly attributed to the fact that it's a smaller city, right? So the perception is that there are less jobs. So we've had to really work hard at how we address that and what programs we can put in place to support students through that, whether that's, even how they can prepare themselves for part-time employment, even before graduate employment and things like that. The continual engagement piece is obviously very important, providing a platform for students to come back. There are so many factors that go into that overall student experience. So that are not necessarily, again, in our control, but I guess what we've strived to do is bring the stakeholders together and make it feel like that the whole city is wanting to wrap their arms around the students.
Yeah, that's not easy to do. Yeah, and it is really interesting. I think what you touched on about the different roles of different study bodies. Some are more promotion focused, some are more focused on the support, and also the role, the line where the council steps in. I'm noticing that for example, City of Sydney is doing food banks and things like that in town hall, and that's quite interesting to see them stepping into that role. And Study New South Wales is doing a whole bunch of things in the accommodation space, as you said. So yeah, I think they're all doing different things, and they're all trying to make sure that the student has that sense of safety when they're here.
Yeah.
But if we move it on, I mean, there's still very little sort of federal financial support for international students, and as you know, a lot of them have lost their part-time jobs. That affects their ability to pay rent.
Yeah.
If they do lose their jobs and they can't pay their rent, what about the accommodation sector? I mean, do you see that bouncing back and changing in the future?
Look, I'd say, I mean, there's been some initiatives announced in response to this particular situation right now. I think the Australian Homestay Network has announced their support network, which I think is a great initiative. What a fantastic way of I guess, accessing or tapping into that real community support and providing that safety net for international students. I haven't been privy to any conversations recently, but I have no doubt that the purpose-built student accommodation providers are also giving serious consideration to this as to maybe what some of the strategies they can put in place in the future. We're all very invested in this we don't want students to fall through the cracks, so I think that I imagine that there would be a huge amount of attention being given to some of the strategies that can be put in place to support students. Obviously, I believe most states or all states, have got a moratorium on students being evicted, if they can't pay their rent. So look, I guess there's some great initiatives in place at the moment. The big unknown is how long is this going to go on for? That's probably the biggest challenge that I think as time goes on that we'll be facing. So yeah, and it goes, as you said, it goes to their students' ability to regain their part-time jobs, and yeah, there's a lot of unknown factors, and I think it's going to be it's a bit difficult at the moment to know where we're all going to land, when it's going to land with that.
Rob, do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, that's an interesting one, the accommodation sector. I mean, obviously they're somewhat hamstrung by who they can help, because they in a way it's a double-edged sword. They have these empty rooms because there's no students coming, but they can only house students in a lot of cities as well. But then students don't have any money, so they're being kicked out of private rental. And that rent moratorium is an interesting point, because if you're a housemate who isn't on the head lease,
that's right.
Are you then slipping through the cracks? I mean, can you then be evicted? I don't know. I can't stop thinking about how easy it is for a student to be knocking on the door of a managed student accommodation place and, do you have any rooms? But I just don't know how those managed student accommodation places are going to react when that happens.
James, it's an interesting one, because accommodation is one of the big stress factors for students when they first arrive. And it's not just necessarily about where they find it, but then it's about the security. And if they haven't got bonds or haven't got contracts, and so many of them don't have contracts, it's a big security issue for them. And it creates a lot of anxiety. And that's a reality. And I think if you put yourselves in student shoes now, they would be feeling very vulnerable. They've not got a sense of history at the moment, not got a sense of identity, not got a sense of place. So, and they need a home.
Yeah, that's right.
Some of the state I guess, support packages that have been announced have included some initiatives. I think for Queensland, theirs includes an initiative to support students with that. So, I think a big shout out to everyone who's really been at the state level and the city level, because you referenced City of Sydney. I know City of Melbourne have been putting some initiatives in place. We've got great contact here with City of Adelaide. They're always very interested in what's going on and how they can potentially help. But there have been some state announcements as well that have really honed in on the immediate need, because as Rob said, it's your biggest. Well, it's anyone's. If you move overseas, it's one of your biggest points of anxiety. I've got to find a place to live, right? I've got to find a place to live.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a question here from, we've got a comment here from Cecilia. So a few of our students have been evicted from shared accommodation where they were just subleasing a room. So yeah, I think it is happening. Sorry, Rob, you go, mate.
Well, I think it's also about, it's about preparedness as well. We've got to look, it's not just about managing them now, but there's the preparedness of, the next influx. And if we've got pressures now, how much that will impact. And so there's a lot of speculation that international students will be a priority group for inbound travel, with the provisos, quarantine requirements, etc. So basically, have you thoughts or have you got any strategies in place about what's needed to accommodate the arrival of this new batch, given the possibly a large influx, given the current stresses? And ultimately, what do you think that will mean for the student, Karyn? I mean, it's a large group potentially coming in on top of a large group with problems.
Yeah, actually, just before I answer that, I've just seen a comment from Karyn as well, from Karyn Goodall from Urban Nest. So it looks like they're seeing some positive kind of signs for next semester, and they've been able to maintain some good customer occupancy. So that's good to hear. It's not to take away from some of those students who are finding themselves in awful circumstances, but that's really good to see. So to your question, yeah, Rob, in terms of students being able to re-enter Australia and in terms of the accommodation piece, I think the quarantine aspect will be a serious consideration from the health authorities. I think if we only have to look at, in Adelaide, there was quite a bit of publicity actually. We had a couple of flights of repatriated Australians from India, which is happening all over Australia. But I guess Adelaide said, yep, we'll take a couple of plane loads, and it actually got quite a bit of publicity, right? So it was very visible as to the kind of requirements that were put in place. There was tight security at the hotels, and it was pretty, like I said, it was pretty well known that those people couldn't leave their rooms, and they were being very well catered for and very well looked after by the hotel, who even put a concert on for them at the end. I don't know if you remember that, James, but they put a concert on in the out in the little parkland. So I think, Rob, there will be these health requirements for quarantine. Obviously, students will need to be in quarantine for a couple, so that those touch points with their institution or with other support agencies will be really critical. And I think that will be one of the requirements, is that daily kind of contact with students. And then I think that, again, I'm speculating, but I think there'll be interest in where the student is transitioning to after that quarantine piece as well. So, are they going to a supported environment like a public, purpose-built student accommodation provider, or a university, college, or whatever it might be? I think there'll be interest in where they're transitioning to as well.
Yeah, it is an interesting one. I mean, I was thinking about what's going to happen to these students who are already in managed accommodation. Semester 2 comes along. If they stay, and Karyn from Urban Nest mentioned that she's seeing a high customer occupancy rate for students to sort of stay on. If they stay, and then new arrivals come, then you've got this problem where there may be, the best controlled environment for students to self-isolate would be managed accommodation, because you can regulate everything. Homestay, I don't know what's going to happen with homestay. I don't know how you can self-isolate in a homestay. I think that'll be an interesting one. I'm completely speculating, but I would say that based on the experience of what we saw with the repatriated Australians, the students wouldn't be necessarily allowed to go straight into homestay. They would be required to do some kind of quarantining. Hotel,
maybe hotel, yeah, but where it's a completely managed environment, if that makes sense. And like I said, I'm speculating there, but we'll just have to see how that plays out. And then transition to a homestay environment, which is, again, provides a high duty of care, right? So would be a fantastic option for students to transition to after that quarantine.
Just a very quick comment there, James, if I can. Just the sense of isolation in that first 2 weeks, though, and the first 2 weeks, and when so many impressions are forged. Karyn, you've done so much on that.
Absolutely, it's a very good point. And I think let's not get into the debate about who might be the first cohorts coming back, whether it's continuing or commencing students. But so putting aside the sort of pilot approach, but when those commencing students do arrive in the destination, and this is actually something that has come up a fair bit in the last couple of months, is the newly arrived students in Adelaide, and I'm sure it's the same for many other cities around Australia. They really didn't have the time to forge the networks, forge the friendships, make those connections before things went into lockdown, and they've become, for our example, the education agents here and our education providers have really identified them as vulnerable cohorts because they haven't had that connection. So you're right, Rob, those first couple of weeks are pretty, and first couple of months are quite critical for students to really feel, try and make themselves feel at home. So, homesickness is being exacerbated and things like that.
Yeah, I guess, this is all within the context of safety. And if we look at safety as a theme when we're talking about a city, and then we move into, the promotion and recruitment of a city in the future, how does this look? Do you think safety will become an important decision-making factor when a student chooses a city after COVID, or is this, it's just a temporary thing?
I think for a period of time, yes, I think it will be a consideration. You couldn't look at what's happening in the US and the UK based on media reports. Obviously, we're relying on what we can read and see. That has to have an impact on the perception of those countries at the moment. In fact, that is being seen through research such as the Idp Connect research that was recently conducted. It has shifted the perception of those countries for safety. So I think there is a period of time that we do have, I guess, an advantage, in terms of being considered a safe destination from a health perspective. But of course, that is just one of the many drivers that students will take into consideration. And I think the challenge now for Australia is how we, given we have done relatively well in global terms, how do we, this until there's a vaccine, which could never happen. Obviously the race is on to find one, but COVID-19 is here to stay for a long time, right? So how is this managed going forward? How do we manage that community expectation that there are going to be cases that pop up now and again, and so things like social distancing and hygiene and those kind of practices may be with us for a lot longer than perhaps we anticipate.
Karyn, I think about things like mobility and English language and certain countries, especially more price-sensitive ones. Some sectors and markets will take longer to recover than others. What kind of plans and initiatives do you think need to be put in place to help these sectors and markets in their recovery?
Look, I think we're sort of working through that now as we kind of, we have to still abide by our business planning cycle and things like that. We're really thinking about how can we support our school, our English language, our pathway members. There's all these different sectors whose business models do require on those regular intakes, right? Much more regular than 2 or 3 times a year. I think we'll be very much taking the insights and advice from those members as to how we can support them. I'm sure they are looking at again the research that's out there, their own discussions they're having with agents around the appetite to start perhaps in an online environment and then transition to with a view to transitioning to face-to-face and arriving in Australia if they can. So if there is appetite for that and they need support, different kinds of destination levels of support. That's the other conversations we've been having here is, what role now can we play in the orientation piece if they're recruiting students in an online environment, right? And starting their students in a remote learning environment. Does the city have a role to play in orientation?
That's fascinating. That's really cool.
Normally we're out and about and we're doing presentations to these students, or we're inviting them to our Lord Mayor's Welcome event, at the beginning of the year. Well, yeah, so we're sort of starting to think through what role can we play to support that sort of orientation piece where they, you know, how can we connect them to the city, I guess, as they start their, as they potentially start in a remote learning environment offshore.
Yeah, I mean, because sort of when does a student become an Adelaide student?
That's right. Exactly.
If they've done 6 months of their study online without leaving their home country.
Yeah, how do you connect, you know, again, think it, and yeah, so it's very, I think it is quite critical that they, you know, that there is a very good connection with the institution, obviously, and that they, I guess they get to know a little bit about the city that that institution is in, to enable us to connect with that student, if that makes sense. Otherwise, it's just going to be too random.
Yeah, I mean, look, you mentioned the vaccine. I mean, if one is found, that's great. If one isn't found, I mean, the way in which international students will view the relevance of cities, you know, of the future, it's just going to fundamentally change that, and travel and tourism and everything like that. But really, the relevance of a city, when it comes down to it, what I'm really curious about is whether or not there's going to be anything that a city can really do to position themselves if no vaccine is found, or, you know, or students have to just fundamentally change the way they think about their experience.
I guess their experience is going to be very much shaped by what's happening in their home country as well before they arrive, and therefore what the expectation is from their destination city. I was reading a very interesting article on the weekend by Bernard Salt. I think it's called something like "Coronavirus: the City Centre Can Hold with Changes." So, you know, it was very much looking at what does the CBDs of the future look like in an environment, like you said, where there isn't a vaccine, and where social distancing, where there's potentially not an appetite for being, you know, hanging around after work in a city, you know, going to restaurants or eating places which are quite closely packed in, which creates that feeling of vibrancy, right? I mean, that's what's brought some vibrancy back to, one of the things that has brought vibrancy back to Adelaide is this emergence of these laneways and the small bars and the restaurants. But if you have a completely different dynamic around how people are working, you know, if there's more remote working, less commuting, they're not in the cities as much, what does that mean for the office space and the occupancy? And so I think actually having students in the city will be a very important part of the overall city experience going forward, because as I've said here, they've certainly changed the landscape. Students have certainly changed the landscape of the City of Adelaide in the last 10 years. And you can see that it's evidenced by the retail or the food and beverage outlets that have popped up. And, you know, I think they will be a very important contributor going forward. But what are their you know, what's their level of comfort, I guess, in terms of being out and about? I think that's a little bit of an unknown at the moment. So I would, you know, encourage, this article very much refers to, you know, particularly the East Coast cities and the fact that they are, you know, large numbers of population coming into the city to work every day, potentially socialising before they go home. So I guess, does a city need to really look at, is it about getting more residents in the city? And look, again, every city is a little bit different in terms of makeup. Adelaide doesn't have, I guess, a massive residential population compared to perhaps some of the other cities around Australia. But does that become a strategy of the city councils, you know, that they need to then drive up the resident population? And of course, students can play a big part in that as well.
Yeah. Rob, you go.
Yeah, I was just thinking on that. I was thinking about the importance of festivals and events as well. You know, you've done that in Adelaide, but I think about Vivid and all these other things that bring together. I've always argued that every international student needs a point of reference, but let's just talk about that from a different perspective. Some Australian cities have experienced extraordinary growth over recent years, just phenomenal, unparalleled on a world stage, but the growth will become even greater for smaller, and I'd like to add, like at cities like Adelaide, and also I want to build in regional centres, because I think that's an important component of this to bring in, because these places also can be aligned or associated with more community type environments, conducive places, more chances to interact, etc.
Yeah, look, I think Oh, yeah, look, I guess it would, again, it comes back to, I always come back to the driver for the student, right? So if the student feels safer in a smaller city or a regional city from a health perspective, and that's where an opportunity is going to exist for those sort of small to medium-sized cities. Absolutely. If, you know, again, dependent on how long this situation and how long this virus is with us, really. So that's potentially an opportunity. I think you also hit on something, Rob, very important, is we know that students want that connection with the community and connection with their Australia, you know, the domestic students, and they really crave that. So again, I think that's a role that bodies such as ours, or in lieu of bodies such as StudyAdelaide or our counterparts, you know, the city councils can certainly play in terms of, because they have, you know, the councils, their stakeholders are their community, their ratepayers, right? So they're in a perfect position to activate those communities in a way to put initiatives in place. So, and there's been some wonderful examples around Australia of how communities have really embraced, you know, migrants from certain areas of the world, and who've come in to, you know, fill skill gaps or whatever it might be, but they've become known for welcoming migrants from a particular country or a particular region of a country, and you know, there's some fantastic and it's relatively simple to put in place. It's just about activating the community. So so there's definitely opportunities out there. Definitely opportunities.
We have a live poll, everybody. We've got some questions up there. Three questions. 51 of you have already answered. How can study bodies or councils best contribute to the current international student experience? The winning one currently right now is encourage the wider community to support students on 39%. Which amenities/events do you believe international students most want reasonably restored? 90% have selected cafes, restaurants and bars. And do you think students will come to an Australian city if they know that they will have to face some form of social distancing measures? It's a close one. Very likely is 37% winning at the moment. It's not over yet. I'll finish the poll in 5 minutes. Actually, it's just pipped it. So somewhat likely and very likely are on the same amount, 34%. So there you go. You know, and I guess if we move into sort of how you end up to promote a city, I mean, experience tells us that 20 years ago, and Rob should really be asking this question because it's just up Rob's alley.
But maybe you should be answering the question. Anyway,
I'll give it to you, and you can just
give it to me, and then I'll throw to Rob. Okay, we're going to mix it up a bit.
Yeah. So experience tells us that 20 years ago, the choice was genuinely country first, then the course. You know, but for degrees, it was sort of university first, then the city. But until recent events, the city was first, which was, you know, but post-COVID, perhaps with a greater focus on safety, as we've discussed, and employability, because students need jobs, will cities resonate as strongly as places to go at all?
Look, I still believe, I think it very much comes down to the individual, okay, and I think you can see some real differences across markets. I think, again, I've referenced the IDP Connect research earlier, and interestingly, it did show that, and it didn't ask about city, so I guess we'll use country as a proxy for city in this instance, but for Canada and New Zealand, you know, the country was the lead consideration, ahead of course, although across all destinations, course was still the leading driver, I guess. So, you know, and that makes sense. If you decide what you want to make a decision around what you want to study, of course, that destination has to be offering that particular course. Yeah, I think it's, I think, again, like I said, I come back to the drivers of why someone would choose a destination. So it's got to have the course there. The city has to be considered a welcoming and attractive city. And when I mean attractive, I don't necessarily mean beautiful attributes that we all have in Australia, but I mean, you know, a relatively affordable place. You know, it's got to tick a few boxes, right? So it's got to have the right type of accommodation options available and things like that. so that's then does it offer graduate employment or migration opportunities? And yeah, and then the reputation of the institution comes into play as well, particularly as it relates to the course. So I think it's more of a complex kind of scenario now, and I'll throw to Rob in a second. But regardless of, I guess, any of the promotion that we do around City, I guess I'm always very mindful that a student has to accept Australia's brand values first, right? You know, all of the cities in Australia are in Australia, obviously. So a student has to accept Australia's brand values first. You know, we can't necessarily get away from that. And then they will make a decision based on, I think, what best suits their needs.
Rob?
I agree wholeheartedly with everything Karyn said there. I think it's spot on. I think the thing I've learned over the last decade or so is this great shift towards predisposition to a city. Because people have got their friendship groups, their networks. Very rarely will they come not knowing anyone in the city. And that sense of network gives them a sense of history, identity, security, helps them settle in. You know, we've seen patterns where people gradually radiate out over the first few days. But predisposition cities also based around things like study tours, prior visits. You know, increasing percentage of people were coming here beforehand, which is obviously what could be a potential challenge in the years ahead if they haven't come on study tours and things here. So there is strongly that as well. And of course, you've got the power of social media, all those uploads of pictures being taken in the first few weeks. I want to go there. It looks great. I love the beaches or whatever. You know, it's all those things actually drive those perceptions.
Yeah, Rob makes a very good point there around that predisposition, because one of the things we picked out from some research Rob did for us a couple of years ago is that, you know, a certain percentage, almost 20% of students had actually visited Australia before they chose, I think, or Adelaide, I think, from memory, you know, before they chose to study here. So it was actually one of the reasons that they came to visit. You know, they'd either been to Australia on holiday, but the second leading reason they had come to Australia was to check us out, right, as a potential study destination. So, you know, we saw that as a real opportunity actually to tap into sort of visitors to Adelaide who, because generally people may not know what to expect when they arrive here, and it generally surpasses expectations. So, you know, I guess our thinking process was, maybe they might, you know, get here and go, this could be a really good place to send my child to study. And we were hoping to sort of try and facilitate more of that. But of course, I think international visitors coming to Australia is going to be compromised in the near future.
The data we're seeing from that, I mean, that IDP Connect survey that came out, and we had Simon Emmett, the CEO of IDP Connect, come on to our industry chat, which is live on our YouTube channel, to talk about that survey. And it was really interesting. He did say that there are some students in some markets that are ready to go, and they're keen to get moving. And as Rob's alluded to in the other webinar we did with him, you know, this is a multi-year decision that these students have. They've thought about this for years. This isn't going to change really, really quickly. However, that's based on sort of the current scenario. I guess if I'm playing devil's advocate, in a few years' time, you may be faced with a situation where universities, colleges, everyone has a completely different type of structure, where you've got this sort of little bit of face-to-face learning, a little bit of a lot of online, and then a city has to come in and say, hey, come and study here. By the way, it's a completely different experience to what you have ever experienced before. You know, it's now 50% online. You know, and I think that's going to be. I'd be really interested to see that study done this time next year. And I think that's where it's going to be super interesting to see if expectations have changed, because they might just look at it and go, I'm paying all this money for a 50% online course. I don't know. And I'm playing devil's advocate. I know you're promoting a city.
No, I think you're right. Like the research that we're seeing coming out now, right, is obviously touching on the appetite and perceptions around that online learning versus face-to-face. There's a lot of that kind of going on in terms of exploring that. And it's very clear at the moment that the appetite for face-to-face learning is still by far the dominant kind of desire and need. And because it brings so many more, and it's not just, and we're not just necessarily talking about the sitting in a lecture theatre or sitting in a tutorial, it's everything else that the institution or the university offers, right? And everything else that the city offers. So it's the ability to make connections, it's the ability to interact with your fellow students, because I think it's recognised you learn so much more when you are interacting with others than if you are simply doing it online. So you're right, it'll be interesting to see what this world looks like in 12 months' time. But for now, the demand for that that face-to-face experience is still very, very strong. And we're all holding on to that. We're all holding on to that.
Thanks for that. Rob, do you have any questions? Any comments on that?
I think they've been patient students, but I think there's a limit to how much patience they can explore. I think this is the thing that's concerning me a little bit. And I think you might find a very large rate of deferral happening if we're not careful. I think a lot of people would rather wait till the face-to-face environment comes back. And this is where it comes back.
If it comes back.
It will come back. It definitely will come back. It just might be a different environment, but it'd be the same anyway, as I said.
Exactly. It might be modified, right? Slightly modified.
Yeah. But then you've got that question of, will the institutions lower their fees to match a modified experience? And that's another question. I don't know if they will.
I'm staying out of that one.
It's all right. Rob and I can talk about that afterwards.
Yeah, you can find another guest to explore that.
The poll is finished. I've got some results here. How can study bodies best contribute to the current experience, to the current international student experience? 43% says they can encourage the wider community to support students. So, yeah, that's a really valid point. I mean, it's not easy to do, but it absolutely is important. I think right now, I think the wider community is starting to have this real sense of humanity, where they're actually realizing that there's a part of the community that has just been largely left behind by financial help from the federal government. And it's really great to see South Australia and the various study bodies all step up, and the institutions and different charities and groups.
Governments, yeah.
It's fantastic. Yeah, it's really great to see everyone stepping up. Question 2, which amenities do students want to come back? 90%. Cafes and restaurants and bars. There you go. Pools and gyms, whether it was the worst, 16%. And do you think students will still come to Australia knowing exactly what we're talking about? If there's going to be a different type of experience, somewhat likely. 37% so not very likely, somewhat likely. So even in our own webinar audience, there's a little bit of angst around what students are going to think about moving forward. Well, talking about that, I mean, let's talk about the reputation of Adelaide. I mean, the cities are constantly building their reputation in different areas. Adelaide was building, and still is building, its international reputation as a creative and dynamic city with new infrastructure, more live festivals, everything like that, startups. Do you envisage this reputation is going to stay strong, and how can you sort of best return how can you get what really needs to happen here to make sure that reputation gets heard?
What needs to happen, right? Let me think about that. I probably should have invited the Premier onto this panel with me. Look, I think obviously the signals coming out of government are that giving consideration to the public health, safety, we want to get back to normal, whatever the new normal is, as soon as possible, right? So that does mean that those places open up in the city centre again. There has been a lot of effort in Adelaide, as you sort of referred to, over the last couple of years, about increasing certain investment in certain industries, to ensure that those jobs of the future are there. Pardon all the sort of the jargon that I'm using here, but I think it is very important that there's been a real vision, I guess, around trying to determine what are the skill gaps that exist here, and how, and we've certainly been trying to identify that too, and how we're messaging that to international students, because we're very mindful that many students want to have some reassurance about what those job opportunities are in the future. So yes, there has been, you know, Lot 14 has been a very big focus. For those who aren't familiar with Lot 14, it's the old hospital site here, which has been reimagined into, I guess, a hub for entrepreneurship and machine learning and, you know, the space agency. So a lot of sort of high tech kind of focus going on there. We want our students back. I mean, that's really the foundation of it. You know, like everyone, we want the students back because we know they want to come back, and for the continuing students, they've invested in an education. They've invested in that education experience already. They want to come back. They love the experience they're having in Australia. So, of course, we would want to see things back the way they were, but I think the reality is it's going to be a long time before that. You know, you've referenced it, Rob's referenced it, festivals is a really big part of our fabric here. We'd literally just got through a big kind of festival season in February, March, when things really had to go into lockdown. So I guess for most of the festivals, from their perspective, it was very fortunate this year. I think it remains to be seen how they are reimagined and delivered in the future.
Yeah, and also it brings it into kind of questions about the whole city landscape. You know, we've discussed this many times. James and I, Karyn and I, just as an industry thing, there are points of reference which students have. You know, Vic Market, Federation Square in Melbourne. You've got Northbridge in Perth and Kings Park. Glenelg. You know, they all go to the beach in Glenelg in the first couple of weeks. So they're points of reference. So how do you see the city landscape changing? How do you think it might have to change to really meet the expectations of students in the future?
Well, I guess I think as long as the services, you know, like I said, the retail and the what are those essential services that students need if they are looking to live in the city or close to the city. You know, we're fortunate here that nothing is very far away. Even Flinders University is only really 20 minutes from the city. They're now extending the train link from Tonsley, which is literally only a couple of minutes away from Flinders anyway. So there's some great connectivity here. I think it comes back to the fact that students will just want to continue to be able to access those services, such as the food and beverage and the retail that contributes, I guess, to their overall experience here. You know, there's a central market development on the that's going ahead here. As you know, Rob, from the research, you know, yes, they go to Glenelg Central Market and Rundle Mall were the three sort of reference points they all made in the first couple of weeks. They worked out those three really critical kind of destinations, you know, and I think they were the places that they could access what they needed, and they'll continue to exist, and there just may be some modifications.
Yeah, I guess something I heard an agent talk to us about was this concern that the reputation of Australia, and I'll just speak genuinely in terms of the reputation of Australia, is all this sort of it's very innovative. There's a scientific focus. They have these amazing degrees and about science and technology and innovation. And they're trying to attract students to this vibrant country to study really the future technologies, the future industries. But then we have sort of the federal government sometimes sending mixed messages about how serious it is to, you know, with climate change and things like that. And I don't know, this isn't one of the questions I sent through, but it's a comment that I can't get out of my head is how do you reconcile the reputation that the students and agents are trying to mix up with what the federal government's doing with its actions? I appreciate it's a sensitive topic to talk about government, the way the government brands itself, but yeah, I don't know. I just curious to see if you understand, if you have any thoughts on how you would reconcile that.
Look, again, I would go back to the insights that we refer to, right? You know, the research that is going to be, and I think it will continue to be conducted. I think Austrade's doing some sentiment research they're looking at as well, that we haven't seen yet. I guess, yes, actions do speak louder than words. I think one of the challenges for Australia will be how we give that reassurance to students that we are a welcoming destination. I think you know, again, the nature of our federation has been that the states and territories have taken the lead, I guess, in terms of that welfare piece. But if we can position it, you know, if you wrap it all up collectively, there is a significant amount of support that is being rolled out, not just by the governments, but obviously by the institutions. And I think it's, you know, we have to keep falling back to that. You know, it's not perfect. Nothing's perfect. But, you know, we've all, again, I think, tried our best to ensure that students have had some level of support wherever they are. So, yeah, the reputation, James, is very important. As I said before, you know, it's brand Australia. We all recognise that we're part of Australia. And I'm sure there's a lot of work that's going on behind the scenes to massage the messaging. Let's just put it that way. I'm sure there's a lot of advocacy and advice going on around, you know, how that's portrayed.
It's super tricky. I can't. I feel for the recruiters and the agents selling one thing when actions aren't being backed. It must be really tricky. But let's move on.
Can I just say though, I think, you know, again, coming back to what's in our control, right? What's in our control is the relationships that we have and that we can form with those agents, with those students. You know, they're the things that we can control. And I think you'll find that everyone is so dedicated and committed to really putting, you know, extra effort into those relationships to give that reassurance to students that they are welcomed by our sector. And at the same time, you know, we will stay very much attuned to community, and we want to ensure that there's a community welcoming as well. And that's potentially where some more effort and some different thinking might need to occur.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about, you know, the reputation of a city in the context of diversity as well. I mean, let's talk about what do you want a city to look like in terms of prescribed diversity in the future? Curious.
Look, I think we've always been very proud of the fact that Australia has had a multicultural environment for students to come into. I think, and I think we've had so much success in Australia because we have embraced so many different cultures. From our perspective, you know, there's a really, I guess, a really good balance here between a multicultural city, but also the ability for students to still form connections with who they would term Australian, right? So there's no, you know, who is an Australian these days? It's, you know, we're a melting pot, right, of all different nationalities, and whether we were born here or born somewhere else. But, you know, I think students really just want a connection with a local. It doesn't really have to be the traditional definition of an Australian. They just want that connection. So as long as there's that diversity in terms of that ability, I think, to connect, you know, I don't really want to necessarily, I don't think we should be too prescriptive around what diversity means in terms of nationality mix. I think that's in a way, I think we should, it's a little bit disrespectful to the students who want to come here regardless of which country they're coming from, right? If there's an opportunity here for them, if they value an Australian education and an Australian experience that goes with that education as part of their life journey, yeah, you know, let's welcome them with open arms.
Rob?
Yeah, I suppose I better ask the elephant in the room question for you. What do you think will be the greatest challenge or challenges for not any city in resurrecting their status as destinations?
Look, I think it's going to be, you know, it's the cities. It's not necessarily, I guess, the city that changes drastically. It's how the city adapts. They have to adapt to the health situation that's going on at the moment. And I guess I always come back to, again, how we are going to be welcoming students in the future, you know, how we are going to be supporting them on their way back. So if, you know, let's talk about, if going back to that potentially that quarantine requirement, right? If that remains a requirement for students, anyone or any visitor back to Australia, right? Let's just say there are visitors who want to come and visit family here. They're not on a holiday. So, you know, if you come to visit family, you might be prepared to spend 2 weeks in quarantine before spending a couple of months visiting your family member. So for a student in that situation, what role can we play along with our institutions to make that experience something that is not overwhelming, isolating, even though it is technically isolating? I think, Rob, that's what we have to stay focused on. Is we've got the infrastructure here; it's all still here, right? That's not going away. It's the experience that we can probably have some control over.
Mm.
Yeah, and you could also have local community becoming mentors for anyone who's locked away for 2 weeks.
Exactly. So it's about how we adapt all of these. You know, we've a lot of institutions and states have got mentor programs and buddy programs, and as I said, you know, the city councils themselves have got a huge ratepayer base and a huge, they can tap into these communities as well. So.
We have a question here from, Heidi Benjaminson from the University of Queensland. What do you think of the government's focus on regional Australia rather than major cities?
Good question, Heidi. I think the way I see, I guess my view on some of the announcements around the Destination Australia scholarships and the additional post-study work rights, the extension of that, is actually, I think it shines a light. What those things do is they shine a light on destinations or institutions that haven't necessarily been on the radar of some of these prospective students. And that's the opportunity for that destination or for that institution. It's not necessarily going to be the one factor that potentially switches them away from their original plans. But the opportunity is, and I'm speaking from experience here, from Adelaide being a city that doesn't enjoy the same level of destination awareness as other cities in Australia. Some of the policies around either it's migration or, you know, we obviously are one of the states that has, or one of the cities and states that has the benefit of the 1 year additional work rights. What it does is actually perhaps gets the attention of a prospective student, makes them look into it a little bit further. But as actually some other research I saw in the last couple of days did show, and they asked this question around these destination scholarships in these regional kind of areas, that those regional areas still need to provide reassurance around employment opportunities. So those questions by students won't go away, right? It's enough to get their attention, but they still need some reassurance around employment opportunities and things like housing and accommodation. So you still need to meet those basic needs, or those drivers. You still need to meet those drivers, those decision-making drivers, but they are certainly an opportunity to help create awareness of that particular destination or that particular institution.
Rob, do you have anything to add on that?
Oh no, I think that's spot on. I don't think it will change a lot of things. I have seen some really impressive growth figures for regional though before all this happened, and that's obviously, you know, you can look at some of the cities, and Adelaide's a good example. Darwin's a good example, you know, where they've experienced growth. Often it's also attractive where students have fewer networks, so there's also a sense of community.
And I think. Yeah, Rob, you looked into this, I think, earlier in the year as well, or like maybe it was last year actually. You had a bit of a deep dive into it, and you know there was a couple of key opportunities that emerged out of it. You're right that the community, the opportunity to make those community connections is greater purely because of the ratio, right? You know, you don't have the same. You potentially have to put yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit. And if you go and get a part-time job in a place with not as many international students, of course you are going to be interacting with the community. I grew up in a country town, so you get to know everyone in that country town, right? There is no escaping it. So for good or for bad. But, you know, that's an opportunity. And also, Rob, you also highlighted the fact that a lot of the institutions have specialties, right? They are specialties in their field. Yes. And what a huge advantage that is, you know, what an amazing advantage.
Just think of the Maritime College at Launceston.
yeah. So, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, there's we had Phil Honeywood speak in an employability webinar directed at students last Friday, and he was talking about Darwin. How when he last travelled there, when he spoke to all the different international students, they all had great graduate outcomes because of the city they were in. So interesting. We have a question here from Katie Tribe. G'day, Katie. Look, Study Adelaide has had a very successful ambassador program. For your recently announced 2020 ambassadors, how do you see the responsibilities of these ambassadors change in response to compared to your 2019 cohort? I guess that really comes down to, I mean, it's an extension of an alumni strategy, really. I mean, the people who are here are the best kind of salespeople, but they're selling something different.
They are.
How do you see that unfolding?
So we've had, I guess, we've got two kind of ambassador strategies going on. So we've had, ambassador campaigns in offshore markets where we've sort of now termed them brand ambassadors. And they were students who were about to arrive in Adelaide, and they had agreed to help us talk about their experience when they first arrived and when they landed in their first 6 months. And of course, we had 30 or so brand ambassadors from across South Asia and Southeast Asia who arrived in Adelaide, and the experience they've got now is very different to what they imagined it was going to be. So actually we created a platform, and there's maybe Raf can find the video on our platforms. We've just created a new student story, a new video that shows some of the experiences they're having. And then we have these onshore ambassadors that we appoint every year to help us at our events, right? So again, to your point, James, they're almost our alumni, and they become our advocates. So they're our advocates to fellow students about why the advantages of connecting with Study Adelaide, so the events and activities and programs that we're offering free or discounted, or we're promoting or we're supporting, right? We, the team, we normally get to interact with our student ambassadors throughout the year. And actually I said to Sarah the other day, I said, can we do a Zoom session with our ambassadors? Because we've just appointed them, again, as things went into lockdown. So, that's one of my favourite parts about this job, is we get to interact with the students. So really missing that interaction that we have with them at our events and things like that. So look, like a lot of our counterparts, James, we're having to adapt and evolve our programs, and then think about how we can involve our ambassadors still. And I guess, the things that are going to be very important is how, and we're doing this as well. We've got a mentor program, so we kind of graduate our ambassadors to mentors, and how we connect them with newly arrived students. All of those sort of different things that, like I said, I'm sure everyone else is also thinking how to do similar.
Yeah, absolutely they are. Rob, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I think ambassadors it's going to be a whole new ball game for them. It's going to be the way they engage and reach. I think we also have to look at the experiences. We mustn't just think about it in terms of tertiary. There are people who are coming to schools who might need support and help. Even those ones who may have been nominated to a leadership position in a school, for example, and suddenly they can't lead anything, or they don't know what to do. So it's a very difficult scenario for a lot of people. It's providing the framework for them to engage and connect, but it'll improve. We're all learning how to use tools and how to actually learn different applications and so on. So and they'll adapt. They are very flexible. One of the things we have to remember is students are very adaptable, and they're very creative as well. I've seen levels of creativity which I've never experienced in my life in the last couple of months. Yeah.
Well, I want to be very respectful to both of you and the time you're giving up today. So I just wanted to summarize and say, look, there's a lot of fantastic takeaways that we have addressed here. We've talked about the future of reputation management. We've talked about the future of prospective students and student recruitment. And we've talked about the future of what the student experience really looks like. This is a conversation that is just really starting. I think it'll evolve in really interesting ways, both from a student's perspective, an institution's perspective, and government at all levels, and everyone in between. Rob, Karyn, thank you very much for your time.
Been a great pleasure. Karyn,
Welcome.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Bye, everyone.
We have a survey link that will be sent out after this, and if you please let us know what you like, what you didn't like, and we have Raf will send out the online resource portal as well to help your students understand what is happening with COVID and some of the resources that are there to help them. And we'll also send out, we'll upload this video to our Industry News YouTube channel, which we just recently launched, and it's really about practical optimism and really bringing the sector together. Rob and I will be back next week. I feel like we're TV hosts, Rob.
Yeah, I know, right?
We'll be back next week at the same time. No, next week we have John Maloney as the Pro Vice Chancellor of International at Deakin University, who's going to talk to us about the future of student recruitment. Very excited for that one. Rob's done well to get him. Cool. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much again for your time. And yeah, stay safe, everyone.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.